thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope we're all having a great day today. I know where I'm at, the sun is shining, and it's really nice. It's always like a summertime vibe in the early fall in the Bay Area. So really nice day today. But thanks for joining us. The first thing I want to do is, of course, thank Jobvite for being sponsoring this webinar and sponsoring Talent Board, which I'm going to now talk to you a little bit more about, because for those who don't know that much about Talent Board, and we are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2011, and we're all about research that relates to the elevation and promotion of a quality candidate experience. All things that are working in recruitment today at organizations and aren't, based on the feedback that they get from their candidates. That's what we do on a regular basis. So it's a confidential research program for both employers and the candidates, by that matter, because employers take a survey that is kind of a self-assessment of what they're doing in recruitment, and then in turn they target a population of candidates, most of whom, because that's what we're focused on in our research, are those that are rejected, although there is a small percentage of hires in the research as well, because we're looking at really the overall aggregate impact over time with the majority of people that you have to reject. 99 out of 100 people in any given job that are applying at your organizations today are those individuals that aren't getting the job and can have a great impact, positive and negative, on your business and your brand. That's what we're going to talk about today, and that's actually how I'm going to culminate in the end. The program's still open in the MEA and APAC for employers that are hiring in those regions that are interested to participate. It is closed for North America, and we will reopen the program in 2018, late February is the timeline right now. So let me go to the next. This is also kind of a map, the current scope of where we're at with the 2017 global research, the number of companies that are participating. It's actually higher in MEA and APAC, because we're still in process, and those numbers keep climbing. But very excited. Another great, amazing data set of candidate responses to what it's like to go through hiring processes around the world. These, and based on those companies that have the highest positive candidate ratings every year, we also give awards away. So first and foremost, we're a research organization, but we do give awards away to those companies that are really kind of raising the bar when it comes to serving the customer of recruiting, which is the candidate from our perspective, and from from all these companies as well. So these are the winners this year in North America, what we're very excited about, and we're getting ready to celebrate them in person very soon for our event coming up next week. And this is last year's EMEA winners. I thought I'd just share them. These will be determined later in the year for 2017, and the same with APAC as well. Lots of great brands, big and small, and companies across industries that participate every year in the program. Hundreds of companies and some great, and companies, even those that don't win the award, that are still doing some amazing things in recruitment that we love to celebrate as well. Everybody's a winner at the Candies. So let me give you some kind of baseline demographics first, and then we'll kind of build up momentum to hit that ROI of candidate experience as we get towards the end of the webinar. Does that sound good to everybody? This is something I like. It's fun to do. I like doing this. I do this in workshops that we give, and other webinars and other live events. And it's something that I wish I could see your raise of hands, but I'm just going to pretend that I can see. So I'm going to ask you the question, who has the better candidate experience? Who do you think? And older or younger candidates. And I know the question is, well, what does that mean, Kevin? Who's older and who's younger? So we don't ask for age when we do our research. We ask a generation. So how we're basically delineating this is those individuals born before 1982. Please don't throw rocks at me. I'm a Gen Xer myself. And those born after 1982 will be the younger candidates. That's kind of the dividing line in this question. So what do you think, older or younger candidates? Well, I'm going to show you now. This is based on this year's research, and it's by a decent, significant margin, the younger candidates overall, based on our research. Now, this is correlating a question that we asked the candidates, hey, based on your overall experience, how would you rate that experience on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, with 1 being the lowest score and 5 being the highest score? And so younger candidates say, through the survey research at least, they have a 12% better overall candidate experience relative to older folks. And it's a little bit lower than it was last year. It was about a 16% difference last year, but still younger tipped the scales in that effect. So let's go to the next one. I've got a few of these for you. So who do you think has the better candidate experience, managerial or non-managerial? Now, a hint, think of the data I just shared with you. It's going to be similar. So here's the deal. I always get a mixed hands that go up when I share some of this data, and sometimes because I think we like to think that maybe older folks and the managerial folks are getting a better candidate experience, or at least according to our survey research, that is not the case. The non-managerial, again, 12% higher relative to the managerial candidates. Down again a little bit from last year, but still a statistically significant difference when it comes to a better candidate experience. And I know that a lot of you are like going, well, there's, what else is going on there? I mean, there's a lot going on under the hood. This is a big bucket question and answer correlation that I'm sharing with you. And one of the theories that I know that we have is that, managerial candidates, there's a more complexity to the hiring process for them. And that there's more layers they have to go through, and hence that unfortunately it tends to deteriorate a better candidate experience. So if any of you have gone through that, you know what I'm talking about. And for either entry level, not necessarily younger in this context, but those that are frontline employees, not so much complexity theoretically. So that's just something to think about. And I got one more for you. This is always a fun one. And I really wish I could see your hands raised here, because I'll tell you exactly what happens every single time. Who do you think has the better candidate experience, women or men? And when I ask this question, when I'm live and with an audience, usually I get at least 2/3 of the hands go up for the men when I say, what do you think? And I get it, I understand it. But according to our data, again, the talent board data this year, it's actually almost virtually no difference. And it's the women have the slight edge, but it's not really statistically significant. So this year it's about a 3% difference that women rated higher, and then men, and then last year, the year before, it was 4.4%. So again, not statistically huge, but more of kind of a dead heat in that regard. And we can argue that till the cows come home, I know. But again, big bucket answer for a lot of candidates in our survey research who are rating on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, and because we do ask for gender, obviously. So anyway, that's just the way I kind of wanted to set the tone with everybody, get you thinking about candidate experience and your own experiences. In fact, as I go through this, I'd really like you to think about that. And as recruiting professionals and leaders and all of you that are online and in HR, think about yourself as a candidate and all the different job searches that you went through and the experiences that you've had, both positive and negative. I know it's easy to remember the horror stories that we have all had, but I'm sure that there are positive ones as well, and I want you to think about those as we go through and progress to the end of this presentation today. This is just giving you the breakdown by industry of the employers that participated in the research for North America only this year, so far, since that part of the program closed back in August. So this is a breakdown. This is pretty much has trended similarly over the past few years in North America. We get a big chunk of technology and services, financial and healthcare, and then a lot of smaller other breakdowns as well, and even some nonprofit and government that participate in the program. And if you go back onto our site at thetalentboard.org and you can study the winners for this year in North America, it's a really interesting, diverse mix of companies, and even a university in there as well. So it's great to see recruiting organizations at, again, a diverse group of companies, big and small, really trying to work on improving recruitment as well as the candidate experience, but not just, and I'll emphasize this throughout too, not just so that we're trying to make every candidate happy and give them a balloon and thank them for their time. That's not what this is about, because at the end of the day, this is a business transaction. It's a messy human one, but it's still a business transaction. that you have to say no to 99 out of 100 people, right? That's not easy. It's an uphill battle at that particular point. So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go through. Now let's talk about kind of the key ratings. These are the key ratings that we look at when we determine who wins a Candy Award, and some of the key ratings that we write up eventually in our research report. So for this year's data, it'll be to the end of the year, early next, and we'll have our next big research report ready. But in the meantime, this is data from basically this year's data set. So we asked, again, as I mentioned earlier, the candidates about their overall rating of their experience, right, on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. So what this is doing for you now is comparing the difference between all the other companies that participated in the winners this year. And the winners always have an edge when it comes to the 4- and 5-star experience. And these are things that we write about extensively throughout the year, what they're doing differently. And I'll share some kind of generic examples as we go through, but in our research and articles and webinars and workshops that we do, we share best practice and case studies all the time. But you can see on this slide that definitely they have the edge, the better experience overall. The huge missed opportunity for a lot, even including winning companies on the left when it comes to the 1 to 2-star rating overall. So it's interesting to see the difference between what these more progressive companies are doing versus all the others that participate in our research. This is even more differentiated and more of a margin here. So we asked the candidates, how likely are you to apply again based on your experience? And it's on a 4-point scale. This is kind of our version of a behavioral NPS score. Goes from definitely not to extremely likely. And you can see on the extremely likely side, it's a 10% difference between what Candy winners were rated by their candidates versus all the other companies that participated. It's a 10% difference. That's pretty significant. And then again, a missed opportunity on the left for all those companies that are on that part of the scale. The next one that we look at, we ask the candidates, how likely are you to refer others based on your experience? Again, same 4-point scale, and you can see on the right, even more significant difference, 12% difference between winners and all the other companies that participated. 36% so they were extremely likely to refer versus 24% of all the other companies. That's a big difference. And again, we'll touch on some of the things as we go through the presentation of what they're doing differently, and share some of those with you as well as we go through. And then the last one, which is one really kind of helps me at the end too with the punchline when I get to the ROI of candidate experience. This is a question that we ask, based on your experience, how likely are you to change the relationship with that company? And that means it's a 4-point scale that goes from negative, I'm going to sever the business relationship, meaning more or less, I'm not going to apply again, refer others, or buy stuff if you're a consumer-based business. And on the other end, it's a great candidate experience. I'm going to increase my relationship. I'm definitely going to apply again. I'm definitely going to refer others, and I'm definitely going to buy stuff if you're a consumer-based business for the most part. So you can see, again, the difference between Candy winners and all the other companies. It's another 10% differential on the great candidate experience side. It's pretty significant again. So again, those are the key data points. There's lots of data that we have that I'm going to be sharing today, but those are the key ones that we do when we determine the overall high positive candidate ratings. You can see the difference is really there. So I'm going to kind of bounce us through. We always talk about recruiting in a linear fashion. I know we talk about attraction, application, screening, offer, onboard. It's not as clean as that. All of you know this, that it's kind of constantly looping back on itself, and individuals that had just been maybe not considered or pulled back in again for another potential search, and everything's always looping back, but we talk about it in a linear fashion. It's kind of what I'm doing here as well. So we're going to talk about attraction. This is just some of the highlights already from this year's data. And as I mentioned earlier, really, really nice another set of data this year. Most of us, and this is trends every year, I'm not going to read all these verbatim because you can read them on the slides and now you're going to get copies as well. But most of us are doing our own job searches on a regular basis. In fact, one thing I don't include on here, or maybe I do in one of the next slides, we'll see, but I'll repeat myself. You're not going to judge me, right? Everybody good? All right. So 74% of us conduct our own job search, and this just trended year after year. Also, when we ask the candidates their relationship with the organization, really, and if anybody is reaching out directly from the company, only about 5% of the candidates say they have a direct outreach from the company. So, again, just want to kind of underscore the fact that we're doing our own research. We're checking out the career sites and all the other the sites of value when we're trying to understand more about your company, your jobs, your culture. Values are still really important. In fact, one of the things that we started asking this year, which is besides just what is it that you're consuming from a research perspective, what do you wish you had access to? And that's one of the things I know that Jobvite wanted me to share today to highlight, since it's kind of new in a sense. So the marketing content that they wish they had more of is really more about from the employees themselves. Why do they work there? Why do they stay? And give me some testimonials. That's what they want to see more of. So I'm passing that on to you, because that's something, if you're already doing that in your promotional materials, your recruitment outreach, your marketing, et cetera, on your career sites, great. Do more of it. That's what the candidates are telling us that they wish they had more of. Job content's, that's a little bit different and harder, and it depends on where you live. I mean, not everybody's going to share the salary ranges and compensation structure, but that's what we need to know. What's what we want to know as job seekers, right? But then, but something else that's really critical, though, successful candidate profiles and career path examples are something they want to see more of, and that's something I think is readily accessible that you could develop and use as great marketing materials for your organizations as well. So let's keep plugging away. So one of the things that we find, and I'll underscore this throughout, a differentiator that happens year after year that we see, not only for the differentiator between Candy Winners and all the other companies, but anybody in our research that has relatively higher positive candidate ratings, they're doing more of two things. There's more communication and there's more feedback. And I will keep repeating this over and over again like a mantra, because it's true. And if some of you are nodding your head out there because you're doing it, then you know that it's a payoff, particularly in the front end when it comes to pre-application, application, and early screening. More so, most companies, most of you out there are doing a lot of the same things at the end, right? So final interview stage, offer and onboard. In fact, our data shows this too, which I'll get to. There's a flattening of effect. Candy Winners still have an edge when it comes to the candidate experience, but it's closer because you're investing more time at the end. The bigger difference is in the beginning stages of investing more time, and especially consistency with communication, feedback, fairness, next steps, better expectations. All these things pay the difference. Anyway, we asked the candidates, were you asked for any feedback before applied? And I know a lot of companies aren't doing this, but it's a trend that's starting to pick up a little bit. So you can see this is correlating to 1 in 5 overall experience, okay? So giving you extremes here. Those who are having a 1-star crummy time, they're never asked for feedback, especially before they even applied. So anybody that's, joining your talent communities, your networks, hitting your career sites, nobody's doing that. And I don't know if anybody's out there even offering, like, thanks for visiting our career site, tell us what you think on Glassdoor. I don't know if any of you are being that bold, but there are organizations that are doing things like that as well. So it's a relatively small number when you look at the 5-star experience, but they are getting asked for feedback before they apply. And those candidates that are having an overall better candidate experience, again, are getting asked that information. And it's something that we really do recommend, that you don't, if you've never asked any of your candidates for direct feedback before, and or you only do your hires, that's great. There's a value to that. But also know that with your hires, there's a halo effect as well, right? So you may not necessarily know that they had a, maybe semi-brutal time getting to the door. You made them the offer, they took the job, and then you asked them to rate that experience of joining your organization, and probably they're going to rate you higher because of the fact that they got the job, even though it was not the greatest experience overall. So keep that in mind when you start diving into asking for more feedback from candidates at certain stages of the recruiting process. This is showing you now the difference between Candy Winners and all the other companies that participated on Because besides the other key data points I just outlined for you, at every stage of the process, the candidates answer as far as they got in the hiring process, and most are going to make it through research and application, obviously, and that's what we see in the numbers. But when they rate just the research experience before they applied, again, quite a difference, at least 8% on the 5-star side and 4% on the 4-star side with Candy Winners versus all the other companies. So, again, obviously this trend will continue throughout, although it starts to collapse as we get later on in the process, as I mentioned before. So here's some of the things that they're doing differently and doing or doing more of. So things like, and I'm not going to read all of these, but not necessarily relying solely on written job descriptions. If any of you out there have been experimenting with video job descriptions or multimedia job descriptions, they've got more information that can be, they're almost like their own niche sites that can be used in promotions across social networks, link back to the actual career site where they can apply. I mean, there's a lot of some of our great sponsors of the Talent Board, which you can find on our site too, including Jobvite, are doing some really cool things in that regard. But the fact of the matter is that it's, the static job description is just, it's just block. So the more that you can kind of jazz that up and give them more information, give them more employee testimonials, for example, that's always really huge. Career site is still really important, especially when they've decided that they're interested in your business and your brand, obviously. I mean, besides going online first and doing a Google search or Indeed, et cetera, once they've latched on to companies that they're interested in, they're going to, of course, explore your career site. The customer service approach is something that I also want to highlight here, because I don't know if any of you out there have experimented with either doing live chat sessions a few times a week with candidates that have questions for you about the organization, the jobs, the culture, et cetera. Maybe you have chatbots you're experimenting with. That's kind of new right now as well. Or you're just doing Q&A sessions on a Twitter chat or a live Facebook feed, or the list goes on. But there's a lot of customer-centric, customer service approach to recruitment now on the front end before candidates even apply. And that's just something to keep in mind and as a differentiator. And then again, I will continue to emphasize communication and feedback. Even from at this stage, it does and can and will pay off if that's invested in. And I know there's lots of questions as we dive deeper into this about, well, how much is too much, or what do you say? I could do the whole day workshops on some of this stuff, but I'm giving you some tidbits, which is just some things to think about if you're not doing some of those things now that can help differentiate you going forward. So let's talk about the application stage now, because it's not the most glamorous part of recruitment, right? But I would hope, one thing I do hope, because this is a trend that I see, that many of you have started to collapse the front end of making it more user-friendly, of getting folks in the door, and then letting your back-end processes, your technology, your recruiting teams, and screening, assessments, et cetera, start moving people into the right buckets in the pipelines. So maybe your application process went from 30 minutes to 15 or 10 or 5 even. In fact, I just talked to a company the other day, it's like 3 minutes. But because they got back-end processes built in to help with filtering and screening and moving people around. So that's one of the things, that's a trend that we're seeing with a lot of organizations, big and small. A couple of things else to point out here is that most employers today are offering mobile apply of some kind, but it's always fascinating to me that I think this will grow, though, more in the next 5+ years, but because more candidates are just using their devices, regardless of generation, do a lot of things. And it's getting easier to apply on mobile, but not many are still applying. Only 14% said they're applying via mobile versus the 91% that are offering it, but I think that will grow still. But another differentiator that you want to consider is that those who have an overall 5-star experience at this stage, over 51% of those candidates who had that really good experience, they're seeing some process indicator of knowing where they're at in the application process, being told. Think of the Domino's pizza example, right? When you order pizza from Domino's and you see visually where you're at, prep, bake, out for delivery. There's not a lot of companies that are that are doing that kind of high-level visualization, but there's more that are even just putting up a static page. These are the steps of the application process, or at least I know where I'm at when I'm actually filling out the application online of what's next. But that comes easier anyway when you start collapsing the amount of time that it takes to get inside. So just some things to think about on the application stage. This is always just depressing to me, just really depressing, is that when we ask the candidates how long after they apply they were waiting for a response, and now it's really it's about 52% that are telling us overall that after 2 or 3 plus months they've been waiting for a response. Now, some of you may argue, well, we send auto replies, they should have got that. Maybe, but still, there's still a disproportionate amount of people that are just not getting anything. And this is the black hole that we've talked about for years and years and years, right? So this is an area where I think a lot of organizations need to continue to work on and focus and try to improve on, because the two things that any of us want, and again, I put yourself back in the candidate's shoes, right? Walk a mile in their shoes. Think about when you went through a job search, you want at least acknowledgement, I'm interested in your organization and your job. And 2, give me closure when you're just not going to pursue me any further. Let me know definitively, make sure I understand. And I know it's hard to do for those of you who have high volume hiring, and there's a lot of folks that you've got to automate in the communications, but there are ways to ensure that still happens, and because it's still a lot of folks that say they're just not hearing anything. And then we like to rate, this is another way to look at the difficulty of what it was like to apply, correlating with the 1- and 5-star experience, right? So this is kind of a softball, but I just wanted to kind of point out to you that those that are having an overall 5-star experience, it's very easy, much, much more of the time than it is if I'm having a 1-star. You can see the huge difference, almost 60% on a very easy side. So just something to think about again with collapsing, making it easier to get into the front door at the end of the day from a difficulty perspective. And then when we again ask the candidates, where you ask for any feedback after you applied, and the numbers grow a little bit, so it's growing, and it has been growing a couple ticks here and there over the past few years. But those again who are having a 1-star crummy time, most are just never asked, of course. But then there's still a growing percentage of those are for the 5-star side. So those are the extremes that I wanted to show you. And again, these continue to be differentiators, communication and feedback throughout the process. And then here's looking at the rating of just the application stage, because again, every section of our survey of the main, as far as the candidates got, if they made it this far, which most do, then we're asked them to rate it again. And again, you can see the difference between Candy Winners and all the other companies that participate when it comes to the 4- and 5-star experience overall, and the missed opportunities on the other side. So one thing that we always like to talk about when we're doing presentations, et cetera, is just asking the talent acquisition teams, are you walking in your candidate shoes? Have you applied for your own jobs online? Have you gone through that process? Have you found the bugs that are like, wow, we make people go through this? And have you done it? Are you doing it more than once a year? These are recommendations that we make to organizations based on what we see in the research is understand what it is that you're making them go through, and you go through it yourself. Kind of be your own secret shopper in a way. And if you haven't done it before, make the recommendation to your team to do it. And try to be realistic with expectations in the beginning. If the process of applying is going to take at a minimum 4 weeks before they may hear anything back, and gosh, I hope they do, but and you're telling them you're going to get back to them in a week or 2, please adjust that. Make that more realistic. Be clear with them what's next. Again, you don't have to be granular on every single level, but just think about the perceived fairness goes a long way when it comes to being a job seeker. Folks are putting themselves out there, especially those that are somewhat or even more so qualified for your jobs that may just never feel heard, right? So acknowledging skills and experience. Are you asking a question even in the small collapsed version of your application online, is there anything else you'd like to tell us that we didn't ask you? That question goes a long ways in fairness as well. And then again, I mentioned acknowledgement and enclosure, and then the communication and feedback doesn't stop, and should really be ratcheted up at this stage, even for those that have a lot of high volume of applicants that come through their organization. One thing that's interesting, I've been talking to some big organizations recently that participate in our research that some of us are kind of creating more strategic sourcing outreach, going directly to candidates, and not just for like hard to fill niche, technical positions or senior level management, but actually making concerted efforts to go more directly to the candidates themselves instead of doing the kind of like the feeder application approach. It'll have to be a trend that we'll have to monitor. Pretty interesting. So let's talk about interview now, screening interview, because this is where we start to see that more of you out there are starting to invest more of your time, like communication and feedback, for example, more hands-on approach at this place. And that makes sense, right? Because these are you're getting to your kind of semifinalist and finalist stage as you kind of whittle down the pools. So one of the things, though, that is interesting is that only about 20% of candidates are getting an email from the recruiter or hiring manager when they're rejected at this point, and only 7% are getting a phone call, according to the candidates at least. This seems dramatically low, especially at this stage, even if it's early screening or later interview. Some of you may argue that you're doing more of that at the final interview stage. That's great, but again, this is what's coming through in our data. One of the things that is another differentiator that we see as well is that a big percentage, over 80% of the rejected candidates who had an overall 5-star experience, they're also encouraged to apply for another job with the organization at this stage. So if that's something that you're making a concerted effort to do to kind of keep nurturing that relationship, then that's a good thing. So here is when they weren't selected, they knew definitively that they weren't selected after the interview. We asked them, were they given any feedback at this stage? So, and this kind of correlates with one of the things I just mentioned on the previous slide, but when you look at the 1- and 5-star experience, there's no feedback given for 1 star, but mostly over 70% are not getting anything at this stage. But those who are having a 5-star, not only are they getting a little bit more, they're getting more feedback overall, they're also being encouraged to apply for another job again. And I think that's one of the things that, again, I just wanted to underscore and emphasize that is really important and a differentiator for organizations today, and something for you to think about with building into your process. And again, I know it's hard if you got a ton of recs that you're managing, and again, it's not about giving every candidate a balloon, but it is about, again, thinking from a business transaction perspective and a future fit. If you got future fit folks, you may want to make that extra investment in order to woo them at a later date. So there's a lot going on this slide, I know, but the thing that I want you to think about is we ask kind of this big laundry list of answers about what they're experiencing when it comes to being prepped and communicated with for the interview process itself, all right? So that's what this is, and it's correlating 1- and 5-star experience. The big takeaway, though, as you can see, the big red flag of missed opportunity is that those who are having an overall 1-star experience are not getting anything. Almost 60% of the time, they're not getting any of these things. Not prepped for the interview. They don't get to know who the agenda is. They're not being escorted. There's just not this kind of concierge mentality for those that are having a crummy time. Those having a 5-star, they're getting some or a lot of these, and you can see all those green bars, the differences therein. And if you're doing, some of these for your interviews or most of these things prior to, especially for those that you're bringing on site, then that's great. You want to continue that process. Or if you're doing video interviews, even for remote employees, making sure that they're prepped ahead of time, they know who they're going to be meeting with. And I'll get to this, but I want to kind of mention it now. One of the biggest no-nos is that the disrespecting times of your candidates. I know sometimes the hiring manager scheduling is out of your control, and they go haywire and they don't show up for interviews, or they say they have to change it at the last minute, that's going to be a death knell, especially for key candidates that you're trying to win over, if their time is disrespected during interviews and appointments. And we'll get to that in a bit too. So then looking at, are you asked for feedback after the interview is over? And again, majority that are having a crummy time overall, of course, they're not being asked at all, but they're still not as much as I would love to see. Those who are having a great overall 5-star experience are not getting asked that much more. And this is, these were your finalists or semifinalists, right? That, getting impressions about what they experienced, how could you do it better? This is all important information for you and the team, kind of your own kind of recruiting scorecard, even if you don't do that currently with your organization. So that's just, again, something to keep in mind. And let's hope that in the future years we can get the green bars higher on some of these slides. So this is what I meant when I said how it starts to collapse a little bit. On the 4- and 5-star side, you can see how the margins are closer between Candy winners and all the other companies. But Candy winners still have the edge. Although, again, most of you are investing at least some of these things in the final stages, at least in the interview stage, for sure. So, again, kind of just repeating some of these things, being clear and concise, making sure that they know next steps and what the follow-up is going to be. Use assessments. I know a lot of companies are using a lot more of assessments and even things like cultural fit and job fit or job simulation as well. Those are big growth ones in our research that we see too. And again, with the communication and feedback, making sure not only to providing as much feedback that you're comfortable giving, which I know some of you out there are like, that's an iffy one, right? And I get it. Well, I always like to kind of tongue-in-cheek say this is where you need to be specifically ambiguous with your feedback. So hopefully I got some smiles out of that one. And then asking for feedback too, especially starting at this stage. Again, with your finalists, your future fit folks, your silver medalists, just getting an understanding and trying to keep nurturing those relationships, those that makes a difference, with it keeping as much of a positive candidate experience that you can provide at that stage. So let's get to the offer and onboard now. So now these really are, right? These are the folks that you want to work for you, and you're making those offers to. And yet, again, I won't read all of these, but not less than 40% of the candidates are not getting calls from their hiring manager before they start work, according to what they tell us through the survey research. Granted, it's hiring manager, and it's kind of out of your control to a certain extent, but it's a huge missed opportunity. These are the new hires. Everybody should be contacted and welcomed and all that good stuff. So maybe you're doing that at your organizations, and I hope that's the case. Asking for feedback before they start. These are your hires now, all right? And again, we look at the 1- and 5-star correlation, and that big red bar, and the no, I was not invited to provide feedback is 70% of those candidates. But even the 5-star, again, it's not that, it's about 24%. That's great. But, again, I think it could be a lot higher, especially at this stage. These are the hires, right? So if any of you are interested at all in even starting somewhere to try to get some feedback measurement in place, and again, even considering the halo effect, still start with your hires and then go from there. So now you can see how it's really collapsed when it comes to the offer rating overall between 4- and 5-star. It's really, really close here. And the same thing with the onboard rating too. Very, very close. So again, I already kind of hit that one more than once, but at the end of the day, it's still the edge, even if it's a small margin, is with the proactive communication. We see that again. We hear it from companies. Besides having more of like a hands-on concierge interview process and strategy, whether you're a big or small company, team and resources allowed, the same thing with your onboarding as well. Are you doing that? Because my whole thing is that, and I think about this all the time, if you're gainfully employed, you still have to be constantly re-recruited to be retained. I mean, I would hope a lot of you agree with what I say when I say that out there. But that's really the case. That retention is all about re-recruiting all the time. And maybe your organization, you hand that over to HR and you're not really part of that internal mobility mix. Maybe you are. I hope you are. And I hope that's a trend that grows. But the proactive communication continues to be to give companies an edge competitively when it comes to the talent. So now I've done all this, kind of giving you, kind of whipped through a lot of things and giving you some tidbits here and there about what's being done differently, what you should be doing differently from, beginning to end. Now let's talk about the impact of everything. So like I said at the beginning, think about what it's like being a candidate and your positive and your negative experiences and what you're willing to do or not do based on how a company treated you when you went through their hiring process, right? Were you willing to apply again or not, to refer again or not, or buy staff if it's a consumer-based business and that is in the mix there. So I talked about a little bit this earlier, but this is the negative side of withdrawal because you have candidates that withdraw from the process, right? And sometimes it's because they got a better offer somewhere else and you lost them that way. But the two most negative reasons with those who have an overall one-star experience are my time was disrespected, which I already mentioned, and the process just took too darn long. Those are the two main things. There's some other examples here too on the slide. But, on the other side of that is that those candidates that are having a great overall 5-star experience, it's less than 2% leave because of disrespected time. That's the difference. It's pretty dramatic. So that's something to really keep in mind when you're putting everybody through their paces and they're taking time out of their days, whatever that means. Think about that from that perspective. Here's where we correlate 1 and 5-star experience with how likely you to refer others. Okay, this one's pretty clear, right? You've got the nice green bar that shows extremely likely to refer 82% of the time when they have a 5-star experience overall. It's huge. 44% who are having a crummy time are saying no way, definitely not. I'm never going to refer. That's definitely a potential impact to your referral networks if they're having not a great experience overall, based on everything that we've outlined so far in this presentation. And then we asked the candidates as well, how likely are you to share your positive and negative experiences with your inner circle? So these are your close friends, family, spouse, significant other, colleagues, you name it. The list goes on. And we've done the past 4 years here. To kind of give you a comparison in the trending. And it's pretty much trended the same. It's been down a little bit this year, but, over 80% for the most part in the past 4 years are saying they'll share their positive experience, and that's good. You want that. You want that news out there, right? But about 2/3 are saying they're going to share their negative experiences, and you don't want that. But they do. We all do. We talk to those we trust, and we tell them what happened, right? It changes a little bit when we talk about the positive and negative experiences on sharing it on social media publicly. So still about 50% of individuals are going to share their positive experiences online. This could be in the shape of the Glassdoor review, a tweet, a Facebook post, a LinkedIn rant, or a positive one, not necessarily a negative one. Whatever the case is, right? They are still sharing positive stuff online publicly. That's good. You want that. That's good for your brand. But about 1/3 are saying they're going to share their negative experiences, and those are the LinkedIn rants, right? Those are the different shares across and the negative Glassdoor reviews, for example, that can potentially impact your business, your brand, your referrals. And the reason why it's not as high as what we've seen before, because this question comes up all the time, is that another part of the answer set of this question is, this information is private. I don't share it publicly, and that's about another 35 to 40% of the candidates. So that's another big chunk. But 1/3 of them are still willing to share the negative. So keep that in mind. And then here's the big money shot that I love talking about. Pretty simple. We asked the candidates again, how likely are you to change your relationship based on your experience, right? And we correlate that with the 1 and 5-star. So those who are having a crummy time told us this year in North America that 46% of the time they're going to sever the business relationship. And even if a fraction of those individuals put their money where their mouth is, that could still be potentially significant impact on your referral networks, whether you're B2B or B2C, or your immediate revenue. And I can tell you now, a lot of the consumer-based companies that participate in our research, I can't tell you the exact numbers because that's part of our confidentiality agreement with them, but it could be potentially in the millions of dollars of lost revenue in business due to a poor candidate experience. But conversely, for those that are having an overall 5-star experience, 74% of the candidates say they'll increase the relationship. That's 10% higher than last year. It's a huge difference. So it's there. I mean, the quantification of this is going to vary depending on company, industry, lots of factors. But the companies that participate in the research or not are trying to figure this out now. And I got an example coming up that I'll share with you. But that's a huge difference. So it's there, right? Increase the relationship or sever it. And then you've got, this is global numbers as of the past 6 years of research. We'll update this once we finish the EMEA and APAC part of our program. But this is the same numbers again, just trending globally. So this is pretty universal. 41% of a 1-star say they're going to walk. 64% of a 5-star say they're going to increase. There you go. And that's global. So some of you may have already seen the Virgin case study from about 1.5 years ago or so that PH Creative helped put together with Virgin. And they basically did their own assessment that they were losing about £4 million annually in sales due to poor candidate experiences. And then they turned it around. And I did provide the link for you too. They turned it around and turned it into a £5 million revenue stream. And again, as I mentioned before, companies know the potential of this impact. And just imagine that it's harder to quantify, but if you took a hit to your referral networks, right, if you don't have those people that you would have had otherwise referred to you to help you grow your business, it does impact the revenue eventually. It's just harder to quantify, but it's there. And then so lastly, I hope nobody's offended by this, but it helps me bring my point home. This is thanks to Talent Acquisition Director Scott Weaver, who's with Teradata now, who shared with me last year at a workshop. It's just about filling the jobs, right? Make your boss happy, correct? Or is it about improving the impact on your bottom line? And that makes a happy boss. That's kind of the question that I posed to you at the end. And like I said, there's still time to participate for those of you that are hiring in EMEA and or APAC. And I am now done, Claire. What do you think?
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Kevin. That was a fantastic presentation, and it looks like we still have some time for any questions. So of the people that are on the line, please feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A box. As hopefully you can tell Kevin is fantastic and happy to share his expertise with everyone. So just the first question, what do you suggest? Obviously, a lot of these people that are submitting to the Candies and to Talent Board know candidate experience is really important. I am sure that's not always the case. What kinds of suggestions do you have to maybe recruiters on the line who can't get the buy-in from their managers or their bosses that it's time to invest in candidate experience?
Well, when you get these slides, use this as part of your business case, number one. I mean, seriously, there's lots of resources on the talentboard.org site as well that we've really, especially in the past 2 to 3 years, that we've really been building up. And all of those things can help you make the case. But, I mean, the thing that, a lot of companies are always hesitant to take a look at this because they think they know how they're doing, and there's always a disparity between self-assessment and what the reality is. But they also are just they're concerned maybe they don't want to know, maybe leadership doesn't want to know. and they're concerned about, what does that open us up to? Is there any, legalities of going out to our candidates that we're rejecting and asking them for feedback? And the bottom line is that you're not going to know until you start measuring. I mean, that's true. We live in a data-rich world today, and the only way you're going to know is to start measuring and asking for some feedback. And again, we have 80 questions in our candidate survey, but they don't answer all of them. They answer only as far as they got in the process. But many companies are just starting with maybe, 3, 4, 5 questions, very simple NPS-related kind of questions, rating questions like I shared with you, and getting some general feedback and starting to really get a benchmark yourself, whether you participate in our program or do your own or whatever the case is, and to get an understanding. It's important to know that first, then to understand what's working and what's not, and what you can double down on and what you need to dump.
Makes a lot of sense. So we've got 2 questions from Mike. I'll start off with the simple one, and then we'll get into the one for you, Kevin. But he does ask, will this deck be shared with attendees? And yes, it will. I'll definitely have those out to you in your inbox by tomorrow morning. So the other question that he had, we're getting ready to launch a candidate survey for all candidates who interview with our company, and also those who are offered. Any feedback about the length of the surveys? We tried to keep ours to 10 to 15 questions to ensure candidates don't drop off. How does that sound?
I would say, yeah, that's a good recommendation. I mean, I would actually say maybe no more than 5 to 10 for starters. I mean, I can tell you, companies that go direct, I've seen response rates that they say that maybe 15, 20, 25, 30% could be that high. Once you start doing it, I mean, you're offering the candidates, you're giving them the opportunity to share their voice, right? So if you're worried that they're not even going to answer you because you rejected them, yes, you're going to get some nasty responses. You're going to get the "you sucks, I hate you" because you didn't hire me, right? I mean, that's just you get that all the time anyway. That's the reality. But I would keep it, no more than that, 5 to 10, maybe up to 15. It depends on what you're asking, what you're trying to capture, and what you're trying to understand. But they will answer the survey. And I can tell a related question to this, because it comes up, and I ask it all the time too, because I'm curious, because now that we've been doing this for, this is the 7th year of Talent Board doing research, and companies more and more that are continuing to do their own pulse surveying continuously. Has anybody run into survey fatigue? And we just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen, hitting a wall that that all the candidates just stop answering surveys. Now you have to measure. There's some strategy behind frequency and how often, and I mean that's important things to consider. But they will answer your survey because you're giving them the opportunity to share their voice.
Love it.
And that can be perceived fairness that goes a long way. So
true. So we have a question from Dawn. She's interested in hearing your thoughts regarding candidate communication for high-volume recruitment, especially when automated systems aren't perfect.
Well, I can tell you that if you're talking about most systems, of course, the amazing platform that's known as Jobvite, right? They're highly configurable to have multiple disposition codes and communications that you can if you take the time to write them more personably and more pointedly and as much as you can, and for depending on when you're dispositioning and where, the systems you can set that up. If you work with your partner, if it's for example with Jobvite, you can get those things set up quite readily. And I know lots of companies that have it's not something that can be done overnight. I always talk about things that you can start in the next 2 weeks, and there are things you can start. But this could take a few months or longer to go through and update all your communications. But you can do it. And it may help with improving overall response and at least getting the closure out to the candidates. But work with your provider and work on writing more targeted communications, again, specifically ambiguous. And always thanking them for their time. Seems like it's a little thing, but I keep getting reminded of some recruiters in the past year, even at workshops that we've done in other capacities. And it's just a nice reminder, always thank them for your time, period. Because, they have spent the time, especially your finalists and those that made it almost to the end. Thank them for their time. So I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's universal. People like to be heard. People like to be appreciated. Yeah. And I would say for Dawn, and this is from a marketer's perspective, but we do have a good number of automated emails that go out in our department or our side of the organization. I would say try and group and tag those people, because if you are dealing with high volume recruitment, you are able to specify and narrow down a little bit more and then automate within those groups, and that can help you personalize without bogging your recruiters down and your team down with too much personalization. There's definitely a balance there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it looks like we have kind of a quiet audience, so I did love those 2 questions. So I think we got some good content.
Hey, Claire.
Yeah.
Claire, one more quick note on that is that if you doing your best to maximize whatever technology you do have in place today, better frees up the time of your human beings that work on your team to have more hands-on communication and high touch as well. So, and Don, I see your point that I understand. We're a nonprofit too. I get it. Do the best that you can. I mean, what you have control over is the messages that are being sent out. So, and if you don't, then you need to switch providers and give Jobvite a call. Right, there you go. But I'm being serious too. I mean, I think that that's the part you have control over. So work on that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I did not ask Kevin to make a plug for Jobvite, obviously I'm a big fan of that. But a lot of the stuff can be done in Excel and spreadsheets. If budget is truly a roadblock, which I'm guessing as a nonprofit, it's definitely a hurdle. And tagging things, filtering a spreadsheet can be difficult, but it's definitely better than email foldering or things like that. So there's always options.
Right.
But on that note, we're a minute to the top of the hour, so thank you very much, Kevin, for this fantastic content. I just want to repeat again, you will get all of these slides and this incredible information and statistics and the business impact and all of this great content that will be in your inbox tomorrow. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.